I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All The Mons. Now, here at Rocket Labs, I am on a journey. I'm on a journey to fully automate the catching and the generation of shiny Pokemon. I should say Cobblemon, that is. But to do this, it is going to take a little bit of work. Now, the idea for this automation all stemmed from a changelog. A changelog that essentially said, hey, mob imprisonment tools are going to be allowed for you to be able to catch Mons. And whenever you catch them, their data is stored inside. And because of this, we can actually use things like the pipes mod to read the NBT data that is on this item, which is so much easier than the other method that I was planning on using, which was going to be using integrated dynamics to read the NBT data of entities that pass by an entity reader. Yeah, I am so glad this is the method, because this is going to be so much easier to automate. Surprisingly enough, the catching of the Mons automatically isn't even the hard part, and the sorting. It's going to be generating the Mons themselves. And so this brings us all the way back again to the Poké Snack. Yes, this lovely thing right here. And there's a lot of things in this list that we technically need to automate if I am going to generate a lot of Mons. Now, I have been doing a lot of testing in my test world, playing around with these cakes, figuring out how far out they spawn and how we can actually manipulate them. And turns out that we can do it quite easily. Today, we're not going to be setting up the farm. Today, we need to figure out a efficient way of automating Poké Snacks. Now, you know what? If I'm going to be setting up these Poké Snacks and automating them, I think it's probably time that I move this setup, into our actual arena, much like all of the other Cobblemon stuff we're farming. And since this is going to be very similar to the way we're farming our berries, I might as well place this in. So I made a copy of it. And we'll just go ahead and set it to replace void and paste it right on in. Look at that. All of the blocks just about ready to go. Oh, and did you know that it can actually fill in water if it's connected to your AE system? That is kind of wild. I didn't even realize this. Now, in this area, I'm going to have a couple of different things. We've got to have the Vivichoke here and also the Hardy Grains. But I'm also going to put in the Medicinal Leek, which I hadn't actually farmed up just yet or had automated. So I've just been kind of manually farming this. But now that we have all of these up and running, all of these things should hopefully be farmable. And I don't remember, does Vivichoke actually drop seeds? If it does, I am going to need a place for it. Does it drop seeds? I don't actually remember. No, I just think it drops the choke itself. The cool thing is this also is going to give me a place for potentially 2 other things that we can have farmed in here. So that's going to be kind of nice. I'm going to line them out in sort of the order that we're farming them in. So this here, we'll have the leeks, not that. Put my pickaxe in here. We'll have the leeks here, and then we'll also have the hardy grains. So that is basically everything. We're just going to lock this up, and this is the primary ingredients that we're going to use for making these cakes. Now, I just want to drop down to this controller, which we're using to house all of our equipment, and I want to make sure that these are all going to be linked up correctly to it, and also that this controller access point is linked up. Then we should be able to lock all of this. And this should be ready to kick on. We have power set up. It's just simply doing a right click. We put in the hoe and then just let this thing rip. There it goes. Interesting. Something that I just figured out, by the way. If you did not manually, or if you did not place the actual collector in yourself, and let's say just Dyers did it, well, you have to hand place it back down. Otherwise, it doesn't collect anything. That's kind of interesting. Now, honey bottles we should have covered because we do have honey basically automated with mystical agriculture. But what about milk bottles? And this has been probably one of the most challenging parts of making the cakes, is just simply farming up some milk bottles, because you need a milk tank, I believe, in order to do this. And so now, thankfully, you can actually use one that is just naturally in the world. But before, you weren't able to do this. But you could potentially send out a milk tank. For example, I have a shiny one right here. And notice that when I sent it out, it was placed about 1, 2, 3 blocks out, I believe, from the pasture block. And thankfully, we can farm it. It looks like it's farmed 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks out specifically. With that in mind, I believe we can actually trap this thing, and we can use our shiny milk tank as a means of farming. So yeah, if we have this and we want, let's say, a milk tank to spawn right here, well, we can go out those 4 blocks And we'll just put our pasture block here and have it spawned in, and then we'll just trap it. So I'm thinking something like this. Let's just check. When we spawn the milk tank, where did it went above ground this time. Okay, maybe we have to make sure we give it enough space or it will spawn up top. And here we are, with this being one of the hardest parts, just getting the thing where we want it. I managed to get it by placing this in the ground one. So now we've got it, and it does actually spawn exactly where I want it. Perfect. So now I think I can use this to my advantage. We can place in some blocks here, give ourselves access so that way we can access it from the side. And we should be able to get a milk tank placed into perfect position here for auto farming. So perfect. We now have the milk tank, but how are we going to automate milk from the milk tank? Well, first step is we're going to need glass bottles. So I'm running some AE dense cable down the underside of here directly from our wireless connector over here, and just make sure that I have access, because we are going to need a way to send glass bottles into some sort of inventory. And then my idea is to have modular routers technically clicking bottles onto here, but we got to give this an inventory to pull from. So this is where the AE is going to come into play. So I'll run my AE cable over here, and then the inventory that we're going to give it to pull from is just simply going to be an interface. So I'll have the interface here. And the idea for this is that if we have some in stock, there's going to be no need to craft some. And whenever we do the actual crafting for these snacks, well, we should get bottles in return back, and then we'll just send those back into our AE system. And so even though initially we're going to have a crafting card to keep these in stock, we're probably not going to need it because it should be able to recycle themselves. But as you can see, we have no problem generating bottles. Now, once the milk is generated, we need a place to store the milk, and I think over here is going to be a good spot for that. And we'll just use our modular router, and we'll send the finished product over here through this access point, which I'll just use a drawer. And thinking about this in the order of operations, we need to pull out of the interface the glass bottles, and we need to send it into the modular router. Here's the problem with doing this by just pulling directly out of the interface. The puller module does not actually recognize only holding a single item in this inventory. Instead, you can only do that with a sender module. The way that the augment is going to work on the puller is it's going to check if there is more than one item in, basically retaining the item inside of this inventory, which in this case would be a bottle. So if I set the regulator augment on this puller to be only one item, it would never pull out because there is only one. But as soon as there is two items in here, it would then try to pull the item out, which is good for filtering things, but not good for this setup. So instead, we're going to have to use a separate modular router that is going to pull items out of that, specifically glass bottles. And then what we want to do is regulate the sending of a glass bottle inside of this modular router. And I hope that's not too confusing to understand, but yes, this is something that we do have to worry about, at least when doing modular routers. So I'll just have a puller card that pulls from the down, and that is going to make sure to keep bottles in stock. And then we can use a sender to be able to send to this modular router. And then this is where we are going to use a regulator card to make sure that we keep only one inside of that inventory. Like I said, that's pretty important for this setup. And so one regulator ready to go. And like I said, we place this in, the bottle should get sent, and notice just one is in the inventory. Perfect. After that, we got to think about clicking the cow. And so for this, we'll use an activator module. We're going to be looking at the top of this, and we are going to be looking specifically for an entity to click. Now, I don't think we're going to have to worry too much about like sneak right clicking, but if we have to change this, we'll definitely look into doing that. But for right now, we want to set this to whitelist because we only want it to try and click a regular glass bottle. That's the only thing we want it to try and click. So by putting that activator module, we're almost done. Now we just need to define a sender to send over here to our controller access point. And I think we may be only able to access the face of this, or we may actually can only link to it once it becomes a formed inventory. So we'll make sure to add that to our list. Aha, and there we go. Now we can click on it. And then in this, we want to whitelist and say, hey, only send if it's Moo Moo milk, which is kind of what we're farming with this setup. So over here, I'll lock this drawer and we'll make sure to put Moo Moo milk in there to make sure that that is nice and filtered. And then we'll just add this to our drawer network. Now this automation is kind of almost done. There is one problem, however. So sneak right clicking seems to be the way to go to be able to get this to actually click on it, but I believe there's a mix-in that is making this setup even more wonky than it should be. So instead of this transforming inside of the inventory when we put a bottle in here, instead it drops the item. So actually, instead of using a sender to send, what we're going to have to do is instead just collect it, just like we did here with an advanced collector, basically, or an item collector. Normally, though, the item should transfer inside of here if it was like a normal cow, for example. But yeah, I mean, this isn't too difficult to do. We can just set this to collect in this area down below, and then we'll make sure to expand it out so that way it covers this entire area here, just to make sure that any milk will definitely be collected. So now the only thing we need to do is put our sender back in, and you can see the milk bottles are being clicked out and our collector is collecting them, and the number of them are going up. And look at that. We didn't even need a security card or anything like that. It is just actually clicking on it. Now, unfortunately, the issue that this causes is that we are going to have to set a void limit for the milk and keep it constantly generating at this slower rate, because I don't want to overwhelm my glass production. And this is not something that I can no longer basically say, hey, stop, if you have too much, which is something you would be able to do if the internal buffer of the modular router, for example, was full because it couldn't send anywhere. So yeah, but at least we now have it automated. You know what? This may be a good time to introduce EMI level emitters. So we can run a cable, place a level emitter on the side of the cable, and then we can place in an item that we want to check its inventory for. And this is pretty cool because we can emit redstone signals based on the amount that we have in our AE system. So in this case, emit levels when they are above or equal to the amount. And so for this time, we definitely have more than 15 inside of this storage. And so it's sending a redstone signal into the modular router. And if I change this to, let's say, 5,000, it will no longer emit a redstone signal because we are definitely under that amount. And so what's interesting is we can change some modes for the redstone here. And if we set this to low redstone mode, essentially it's going to run until it receives a redstone signal, which is pretty awesome. So as of right now, we can set our value to be whatever we want to keep in stock. Let's say 16,000. Let's say we want to keep, I don't think we're going to need that many, but let's just say we want to keep 16,000 in stock. Essentially, it's going to keep running until it reaches that amount, and then it is going to shut off. And you know what? I think this is going to work much better than having it set up on a void system. But now here's where things are going to get interesting, because we're going to be using SFM to automate the production of the snacks. Now keep in mind, for the SFM program that I am going to be building for these recipes, I will have it pinned over on my Discord in the general channel. So definitely be sure to hop on over there and check the pinned messages. You can find that in the top right of the Discord. Now, what I want to build is a universal program, a program that is going to allow us to pull from an interface from Applied Energistics, and I want it to pull specific items that are going to be used in the cake, like the primary items that are going to be used for the cake. For example, the Moo Moo milk, and also the honey bottles, and the Vivichoke, and the hearty grains. And I want those to all be sort of basic, right? It's going to automatically fill this in the correct order. But what's going to be important is the modifiers that we change here. And those modifiers are going to be done inside of these slots. So everything's going to be set up normally, and the SFM code is going to be looking for these items and making sure they all get sent into all of the different pots. But that final inventory, well, that's the one that's going to be pretty important. So let's actually put this code into work. So we do need to input from the interface, which we are going to do in a single line up at the top, input from this inventory. And that's essentially going to allow anything after that to make sure that it can reference the items that are inside, so that way we can pull from them. But we're going to limit what it can actually send. So output retain 1, we have moo, which I'm going to use to define Moo Moo milk, which we are going to put in here. And so long as it contains moo in the name, it is going to be able to pull that. And then 2 each is to make sure that we can send to multiple containers. Now, if we open up the pot, we need to define where we want to place the Moo Moo milk, and the Moo Moo milk needs to take up slot 1, 2, and 3. Now, I have tried doing this by defining multiple lines, which it does give examples for, but unfortunately, I have not been able to get that to work. So instead, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure that it retains one item, because we only want to keep one in slot, or in that individual slot at any given moment. And then I'm going to define this as 1, 2, and 3 separately instead of doing 1 through 3, which is something that you could potentially do, but I did not find that this works. Then I should be able to just simply copy this for the honey section, and we'll change the name to honey. And this is also going to have 2 separate lines. So we can take that and then copy this again. And then we need to define the individual slots for the honey, which, by the way, the honey is going to be 4 and 6. Next, in between this line, we know that this is going to be slot 5 because I am going in order, and we'll change this to the Vivichoke. So I'll just do VIVI to identify that. And then for slot 7, 8, and 9 here, these will be defined as grains to represent the hardy grains. After this whole line is done, I simply just want to have it forget what is currently going on. Now, after this, we're going to have 4 inventory slots that are going to be filled up with just the ingredients that are used to make the snacks themselves. And then the next few slots can be used for actually identifying what goes in to the next set. And I think this is going to be kind of important, and I do want to define this so that way we set each individual slot as their own individual thing. This will make it a little bit more robust, so that way we can specifically define, just by changing the item out in the interface, what then gets produced. So this means that we're going to need to go into the interface and we need to see what slot is what. So we do know up to 4, it starts at 0, so we go up to 3, and so 4, 5, and 6 on the interface is what we need to use whenever we start to pull. So we're going to be pulling from 4 through 6. Now I'm going to leave each of these in their own category so we don't have to filter and say what goes in where. So we'll say input interface from that particular slot, that it is the only place it's going to pull from. And then we want to output that to a particular pot or particular spot inside of the pot. And that particular spot is going to be the first section here. So this will be 10 through 12. And so in this case, we will just say, make sure that item goes in slot 10, and then we'll forget again, and we'll copy this entire section, and we'll just need to create 2 more lines that are doing the exact same thing. However, this will be for 5, and then this will be for 11, and we'll copy this again. And I mean, it is this simple to set up SFM. This will be slot 6, and then this will be for slot 12. And this is basically it. The only thing now we need to do is we need to create a new line that goes, hey, make sure to output basically, or create an input that pulls from all of the containers or all of the pots, and then just sends to whatever we want it to send to. And in this case, I do want to send it to a controller. So to wrap it up, the final output here should just be taking items from pot 0, slot 0, essentially, and then sending that to the controller, and then that should end our program. And so slot 0, as you can see right here, is the output. With that defined, we can shift right click to pull our labels, and then click in the air. We'll set our controller as this block right here, our interface as this block here, and then all of the pots. And that's basically all we have to do. We just need to right click to then push said labels into the system. So now what exact treat am I going to be making over here? Okay, so first things first, we are going to place in our moo milk to keep that in stock. We also need Vivichoke, so we'll go ahead and throw that in here to keep this in stock. And then we also need honey bottles, not in that form. We actually want honey bottles in the normal form. And then we'll put our grains. And now I do recommend we keep them in stock in the amount that is going to be required. So there we go, just to make this a little bit simpler. And then the final items are actually going to be all the Modium apples, at least on this side, which does mean we are going to need a crafting card to keep these in stock. And so I'll just simply put 1 in each of these slots. And so long as you define this final set right here, this is going to be what ultimately gets output. Now I just got to connect the cables. By the way, my pots are currently not closed, but if all is working, the items should get placed in anyways, just like you see here. And that is beautiful seeing this happen. Okay, and then we can close the lids. And as of right now, it is making that Poké Snack with reduced bite time and then rarity. And then notice, by the way, it is sending bottles out. So this is where I said earlier, the bottles are going to get recycled. And this is how they're going to get recycled. Now we do need to take the Poké Snack that gets generated and place it inside of this storage. And then we just simply need to link this storage to this and make sure the whole system is linked up. And now the Poké Snacks should start building up. Also, good news for the whole setup. because we have this controller access point, we also have glass bottles on the network. So it shouldn't be too difficult for us to simply collect all of the bottles that are within this area. So by placing all of these, we should notice bottles getting collected, I believe. If not, we can just simply add another drawer to collect all the bottles. But you know what? To kind of make it even over here, we could definitely put that on this side. So we'll grab our bottles. If I can grab one out before it gets removed, perfect. We'll make sure to store that in here. And then I do want to lock this first. Placing that down, and notice that all of the bottles now get stored. Now, the good part about making all of this code modular is I can just simply copy it from over here, bring it into a new disk on a new network, and just simply paste it in, much like you would by copying it from the Discord. And so now that it is inside of here, we can just simply pull the same labels and just simply label our controller, label all of our pots, and make sure we don't misclick because it is kind of important. So we want to make sure that all of these things are identified correctly, and then we right click to push, and everything should now be set up and ready to go. Now, for this one, what I actually want to do here is I want to use all the modium carrots. So yes, I am going to specify and say, hey, in each one of these slots, make sure we have all the modium carrots and that those get crafted. And then for this, I'm just going to say keep 5 in stock, just to make sure that it keeps it in stock. And then a crafter card, just to keep a nice bulk amount. And beautiful. It should be ready to go as soon as we hook a cable up to this. And all of our systems should hopefully fire up. And look at that. Everything is getting loaded in. And we almost have enough to be able to filter. Perfect. And then we can close all of the lids just like so. And that is how easy it now is to automate any cake we want. Or I should say treat, not cake. And so there we go. Now, the reason why I set up the Poké snacks that utilize the carrots is because this snack is a little bit different. This one is a reduced bait time of 100%, which is the same as the other one, and also has the increased shiny chance, but it doesn't boost the rarity bucket. And that's kind of important, allowing us to also shiny hunt if we want to for things that aren't of higher rarity in the bucket, which I think is really, really nice. And these were both recently added in a future update. And I kind of wonder if we're going to get maybe other versions in the future. I don't know. It'd be really nice if they eventually add, I don't know, the unobtainium carrot and maybe the unobtainium apple. All right, yeah, I better not hold my breath. But still, with these odds, we're looking at like closer to 250 in 1 versus 1 in 8,000. And just like I said at the beginning of today's episode, these are going to be very useful. We are going to need these to speed up the process of spawning in the Mons. And I'm going to use them and manipulate them in very special ways to allow us to spawn Mons in very particular locations. This is where they get powerful. All of which I have been heavily testing in my test world. Yes, we've got some devious shenanigans going on, but this is all going to have to wait until next episode, where I will be setting up and fully automating the ability to AFK Shinymon. And not only in-world automation of shinies, but also our egg farm. We could potentially change this farm up so that way we no longer have to involve our PC and keep getting PC spam. That would be fantastic. But with that, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you've clicked that subscribe button already and also given this video a huge thumbs up. And also potentially popped on over to the Discord and grabbed that SFM code for yourself. I would love to see you over on the Discord. I do hang out over there all the time, so definitely be sure to check that out. And guys, without further ado, it's time for me to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to Real Trill Mike. Thank you so much for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting my content in one of the best ways possible. Thank you so very much. And guys, I'll see you all in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.